We just finished today's Beyond the Gates. It is Friday, August 21st, 2026. And let's get into what was going on with these fools in Fairmont Crest today. We start off the episode at Bill's office with Naomi and Caroline, and Naomi telling Caroline how she's always been so devoted and how they appreciate everything that she's been doing, working for Bill. But Naomi is concerned that Caroline, when Chelsea confronted Caroline about the possibility of Haley cheating on Bill, Caroline kind of shut down. And Caroline says, look, I don't have any evidence of Haley cheating on Bill. And remember the conversation that Bill had with Caroline a week or two ago, where he told her when she was questioning whether he was happy in his marriage and all that stuff. You guys remember that conversation? And he basically told her to stay in her lane. He didn't want to have this conversation again. So, it's like, the reality is Bill is her boss. Bill, while they have a very familiar relationship with one another, and she did all the covering up of his affairs while he was married to Danny, Caroline still has to keep what Bill said in mind, and she just obviously doesn't want to really get involved in this whole thing. But Naomi says, listen, at some point you're going to have to make a choice. It's either your loyalty to my father or to Haley. So I gave Caroline a little something to chew on, and I'm wondering if that conversation, there was intent behind it because Caroline is going to play a bigger role in the fall of Haley as, this story starts to unravel, which is hopefully soon. Over at, I'm reading my notes and I'm trying to figure out how I want to tell this story for today's episode. So let's jump over to Uptown, where Tomas and Kat are supposed to be having breakfast together. Allegedly, they had fantastic sex last night. I'll never believe it because sex me bad. I was just trying to think of a polite way to say it, but sex me bad once, shame on you. Sex me bad twice, shame on you. There's not a third time. There will never be shame on me. So I will never believe that robot is good at sex. There's nothing about him. There's his energy that there's nothing. He has no swag. And even sometimes it's like, oh, it's the quiet ones. Yeah, not this one. There's nothing good about the sex with that guy. And Kat, it's just because you're inexperienced, so you just don't know any better. Uncle Ed is here to tell you it's not good. Okay, so anyway, they're over having breakfast at Uptown, but then Tomas gets a message on his phone and he has to cut things short. He has to go to the office. When he goes outside of Uptown, he calls Madison and tells her she needs to get over to the office, the law office, right away. Now, Madison is at Chelsea's, the Chelsea's place. I guess it's her place too. I'm assuming they're living together now. She came back early from Copenhagen, from Denmark, because today is the 1-year anniversary of Chelsea being kidnapped. Wow. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But yeah, it is. I guess I thought it ran into September, but I think there was a week off. We might be getting ready for another week of repeats or something, because I think there was. You guys let me know. Was there an interruption between the kidnapping and was there? Did she get kidnapped and then did we have some week of repeats, or did she get kidnapped, got found, and then we got repeats? I can't really remember. Anyway, sorry. I'm just. But it is the 1-year anniversary. Chelsea had a nightmare. Madison was sitting beside her, and comforting her. But Chelsea just wants to go about her day. She doesn't want to sit in this whole thing. She gets texts from Bill and Danny thinking about her, but again, she's told them that she doesn't want to make a whole thing out of today. Naomi talked to her last night. So that's the whole thing. So we'll get to Kat and Chelsea in a little bit, but so Madison leaves to go to the law offices. Now I'm going to jump back to the law offices and take care of that story just in one big chunk. So Madison comes to the law office where she sees Naomi in Bill's office. They talk about how Chelsea's doing. And then Naomi says, you could have just called or texted me for an update on the case. And Madison's like, oh, no, Tomas asked me to come in. And Naomi's confused because she's like, why would Tomas ask you to come in? He's not on this case. Then Tomas comes into the office and says, well, Mike reached out to me. And Naomi, why the hell would Mike reach out to you? And then Tomas says, in front of the client. This is like why he should have been fired today. He says in front of the client, Mike is probably frustrated with you since Bill has been in the hospital. That is the moment Naomi should have asked Madison to excuse them for a moment. Madison should have walked out of the office, and Naomi should have cussed Tomas out in a way that would have scarred him for the rest of his life, that he would wake up in night sweats thinking about the cussing out that he got from Naomi. So this does feel like it was an ambush. Tomas did not go to Naomi and give her a heads up that Mike was on his way over to the office to talk about this case. He called the client. He took it upon himself to call the client, have the client come over to the office, and then when the client shows up and Naomi is confused, then he decides in front of the client to say, oh, you're such a shitty lawyer that the opposition is just frustrated, so he's reaching out to me because he knows that I'm better than you are. He should have been cussed out, and there should have been a box waiting on Caroline's desk for his things. So Caroline brings Mike into the office, and he tells them that the client wants to settle. Naomi's like, listen, we're not settling. You're just, you don't have a case, and you're just trying to do a cash grab. Tomas then tries to take control of the meeting and says, maybe we should hear him out. And Mike then says things, like, you don't want me, there are deadlines coming up. You don't want me to get the judge involved. You don't want this to go to trial. What if Bill starts slurring his speech at trial and shaking and doing all the things? So he's trying to intimidate Naomi using Bill's illness as a weakness because she's a woman, and obviously not Ed's opinion, but as Mike, in Mike's mind, obviously because she's a woman, she can't handle the case on her own. Tomas then says, I think a settlement is worth considering, because Mike keeps going back, and instead of talking to Naomi, he tries to talk to Naomi through Tomas because, the man is more reasonable. And Tomas, instead of checking Mike, sits there and continues to undermine Naomi. Once Naomi's like, nope, we're not settling, Mike leaves. Naomi confronts Tomas about undermining her and reminding him that this is not his case. But he really should have gotten cussed out. Like, cussed out where he went into a corner and cried. And then the night sweats for the rest of his life. But, I need this particular version of Tomas, in terms of performance, isn't capable of shedding an actual tear. We'd have to get the Visine out. But I just need him to be destroyed. This is a point, we are at a point with this character where he has no function. He's not a good love interest for Kat. The performance is lacking, to be generous. And this, what I assume is the writers trying to make a course correction with him to make him more interesting as a character, is not working. And it's more frustrating for the viewers because they're watching this man be condescending and demeaning to a woman, regardless of the fact of whether Naomi is is Bill's daughter and he's frustrated by nepotism. Forget that. the way he has spoken to and treated Naomi is indefensible. And I want to know why this show will not allow these women, specifically the black women, to show their strength and stand up and stop being demure for these men. Naomi should have knocked the fuck out of Tomas today. But instead, she remained calm. Now, she did later go to Bill and talk to him about it. But I just, I want, it's one thing for black women, for black people in the workplace to have to take some stuff when you're not in charge and you need the check, right? There are days we go into the office where we've sat in our car for 30 minutes before we walk through the door, just preparing ourselves mentally for the bullshit that we're going to have to deal with. But Naomi is a Dupree Hamilton. Her father's name is on the building, a building that her mother purchased, by the way. She should not have to remain calm while dealing with Tomas. She should be able to walk and step into her power as the woman that she is, and stand up to him in a much bigger way than what they're writing for her. So, my opinion, it was super frustrating to watch. It was super frustrating to watch them not allow Naomi to really own Tomas today, because this is like the third or fourth time we've had to deal with this. Okay, so Tomas says, I think I'll just go to my office and do some work. And Naomi says, that's the smartest thing you've said all day. He leaves. Then Madison is questioning whether they should move on with the case and asks, is Tomas right? And Naomi then has to do the work of calming her down and making her feel more secure again in their strategy. Because, Tomas is like, he was like, oh, you should be thinking about again, in front of the client, you should be thinking about Madison and what this is doing to her. And Naomi's point is, if we settle, in the eye of public opinion, it will look like she was guilty. It doesn't legally, legality has nothing to do with it. Yes, legally, she's not admitting to guilt, but if people find out that she settled, people will think that she did commit malpractice. That's just the reality of it. Tomas needs to be punched in the throat. I hope Catlock kicks him in the throat when she kicks him out of her life. Okay. Over at the hospital, the gruesome twosome, known as Bill and Haley, they're complaining about the hospital, but they've been warned that if Haley does any more inappropriate behavior, she will be banned from the hospital permanently. Bill says, they'll never do that. I won't allow it. And I'll go straight to the board. Vernon was just in my room the other day. That whole conversation was so insane to me. Because do you think that going to Vernon about Haley, trying to defend Haley, is actually a sound strategy, Bill? I don't know what drugs they have him on, but obviously it's affecting his brain. He still wants to be discharged. And we know from the previews, I'm going to jump to the previews. We know that next week at some point, Bill does get out of the hospital. I got to tell you guys something. If the man collapses again, die. Because I am not interested in Bill going to the hospital and we repeating Danny being worried about him, the girls being worried about him, Haley and Randy having another conversation about how, even though she gave him a bigger mega dose, he's still alive. And we'll get to those idiots in a minute as well. So Ashley comes in to check on Bill, and Haley threatens her, tries to intimidate her. Ashley just, keeps it cool, remains professional, and only really deals with Bill. And then, he asks Haley to go get his laptop from the office because using his tablet is too much of an inconvenience. Bill, what kind of tablet do you have? Because I have an iPad sitting in front of me, and I use this iPad to type my notes today, and like it was not a hardship. Get a better tablet. Get like you've got enough money to endow a Parkinson's Research Foundation, but you don't have a iPad Pro. William Hamilton, get it together. Anyway, over at Orphe Jeans, Danny and Andre are having breakfast, and Heather comes in, and Andre is just shook. He's like, oh my God, and he realizes that Heather and Danny know each other, that they've met. And we also see, rocket scientist Randy walk in with a baseball cap and sit at a table because he's following Heather. Now, how many of you out there believe, like I believe, that Heather has totally clocked clocked Randy and Marco, the other guy that is following Heather. So anyway, Danny and Voight, Heather says she's heard good things about Andre. She's playing the game. Danny invites her to join them. She talks about Vanessa and Joey and how she had an immediate connection with Danny. I'm sorry. That whole scene was just goofy to me as well. And why are we giving... I just have a whole issue with Heather. I have a whole issue with this character. You guys know I do. But it feels like it feels like she's eating up the show and she's being centered as one of the new stars of Beyond the Gates. That Beyond the Gates is, going to, like, I just have this reoccurring thought by the end of year 3, the top of year 4, Beyond the Gates is going to look quite different. And it just feels that way. Unless they kill Heather off, I'm going to stand by it. Anyway, it was goofy. The whole thing was goofy, and it was somewhat anticlimactic because what was the point of Heather taking that picture with Danny at Uptown the other day if she wasn't going to use it to scare and intimidate Andre? And, Andre's so spooked by Heather. Wouldn't it have been more dramatic and climactic if they had, instead of revealing that Heather had met Danny through them running into each other at Orphe Jeans, that if she had texted Andre the picture? And with no text, no words, just the picture, because Andre would have taken that as an implicit threat to Danny. And that would have made, I think, the viewers even more bought in to this concept that Heather is this dangerous person, which we have yet to really see anything on screen. So Heather leaves. She gets her takeout to go. She leaves. Andre tells Danny because of Joey, it would probably be safe to keep her distance from Heather. Danny doesn't think there's any issue there. And then, they talk about Chelsea's kidnapping anniversary. And, we find out that Naomi's birthday is coming up. So Danny wants to see Naomi to make some plans with her for that. So there are 4 birthdays now that have been recognized on this show. I believe 4. Let me know if I'm missing someone. Kat, Eva, Bill, and now soon to be Naomi. So, but we can tell, Andre has to go run an errand, which we know what that errand's going to be. So, he leaves. Danny wants to make sure everything is still good between them. But we can see that there's still tension between the couple, which obviously makes sense. They're both hiding 2 big secrets. So we go to the coffee bar. So Haley calls Randy and she needs to meet. So they meet at the coffee bar. And Marco, his name is Marco, that guy, the other person following Heather. And They talk about Bill doing better and how Haley can't risk slipping Bill the poison in the hospital because there's always people around. And I'm like, how would you slip it? Well, anyone. So she plans on giving him, when he gets out of the hospital and comes home, she plans on giving him a big mega dose to just kill him flat out. Randy thinks that's a bad idea, that it really needs to still happen in St. Bart's. But Haley's like, I can barely get him to St. Bart's. And she wants it to happen in the DMV. She just wants to move forward in the DMV with the poisoning. And Randy's just like, well, what if he goes in a coma and the family just decides to keep him alive? We'll never get our hands on that money. And then Haley makes a joke about just poisoning them all. I implore, listen, it's all shot, so I don't even know. There's no imploring to do. But I don't know how many more times they plan on showing Randy and Haley having the same conversation about their failed plan to kill Bill. Like, can we move it along? Because, his heart stopping, cardiac arrest, the pacemaker, it all really hasn't led to, it's led to some more friction for Andre and Danny, but as far as the Kill Bill part of it, we still haven't gotten anywhere. And Randy and Haley are having the same conversation that they have once a week, or, once every other week if we don't see them for a week or so. So I really just need them to and this is what I was saying, sometimes the pacing for the Kill Bill story is really good and we get really excited because when they write it, they write the hell out of it. And then it just hits a wall. Going back to Lynette was such a great complication in the story for Haley. And then, I don't know, they just got rid of Lynette. Not sure, what's going on. If she's dead, then have them drag her body out of the Potomac River so that at least it gets people to chatter. Because we had this whole string of episodes where people were comparing notes about Haley, about Randy, Sammy, about sonograms, fake sonograms, all the things. And now all those conversations have ended. So I don't know. It's making me sigh. Kat and Chelsea meet at Uptown to go over their Tokyo strategy. There's a lot of business talk about social media and all that stuff. Chelsea gets a phone call from an unknown number. We all assume that it's Allison, but there's nobody talking on the other line. And Kat suggests doing a live stream as part of their Tokyo social media plan, but Chelsea doesn't want to be in front of the camera. And she reminds Kat that today is the 1-year anniversary of the kidnapping, and Kat was like, I will never forget that day. I just didn't want to bring it up to upset you. I didn't know if it would upset you. And, they talk about, Chelsea breaks down in Kat's arms crying, and they talk about how your body remembers, emotional trauma. So it was a really good conversation between them. Kat was so supportive. And again, this is about Chelsea, but I will say if Kat could only receive the amount of support that she gives, because today was another great example of how Kat is there for the people she loves, just, without a doubt. Later, Chelsea gets another unknown call. Kat takes the call and says, I can hear you breathing. And Chelsea is convinced it's Allison, which I'm pretty sure it's probably Allison as well. Naomi goes to see Bill at the hospital. Bill talks about still wanting to go home, and they talk about Chelsea, and then Naomi talks about Madison and Tomas and downloads him on the whole, what happened in the office, and she says that Tomas felt entitled to be there because of Mike. Entitled. We use that word a lot lately when it comes to Tomas. He feels some sort of entitlement at Bill's law firm that is just not just doesn't make sense. Again, I will reiterate, Tomas is a junior partner. I just want a line of dialogue that there are that Mike wasn't the only senior partner. Is there, are there other senior partners, or is there another senior partner? And how come Tomas is the only person who has an issue with Naomi being there? It just feels like, even in her conversation with Caroline today, Caroline could have had a line of dialogue that says, the staff and the other partners just, are, as much as we miss Bill, we're glad you're here, in his absence, and you're steering the ship in his absence, just to let us know, because for a viewer who is new or who hasn't turned in for a while, you would really think that Tomas is next in line at that firm. So, and maybe the writers would like to clarify if that is the case. I know that Bill is Tomas's mentor, but being a mentee doesn't mean you get to sit at the throne. And again, Tomas just walks into Bill's office as if, he should just have access to it, knowing that Naomi is now using that office. He should be knocking. It's just a weird thing. And again, it's like this male-female power dynamic that's being written that just feels really lopsided. So Bill says to leave Tomas to him, he'll handle him. So when Tomas comes to see Bill brings up the Mike meeting. He tells him to stay in your lane. He doesn't like how he's been moving about with Naomi. And he says, your newfound partnership would be a terrible thing to waste. And I know there's a spoiler for next week. I haven't read all the spoilers, but I did see a top line spoiler that Tomas leans on Eva. We'll get into that when I do the spoiler preview. So Andre hightails it over to Heather's hotel room. And he asks, and she says, oh, you're right on time, because she knew after their little interaction he would come over. He asks if she's been spying on him and Danny. She denies it. She's been spying on him and Danny. She expected him to come to the hotel. He tells her he's happily married. She says, oh, I can see that. And, the whole while she's trying to seduce him, she's touching him, doing all the things. He says this has to stop right now. He doesn't want Danny to know about their history and wants to know if she's trying to blow up his marriage. And she says, if I was trying to blow up your marriage, wouldn't it have been blown up by now? But, cats like to play with their prey, so no. And then he asks her to please stay away from Danny. She agrees if he gives her what she wants, which we know is sex, his body, sexual coercion. We're doing that again. He goes to leave. She says, think about it, but don't take too long. Now, I'm going to say this, and I hope this isn't, oh my God, how do I say this? There's an ick factor about the way Heather moves around Andre. And I don't know, there's like this, it feels kind of like black man, where it feels very fetishized to me with Heather and Andre. And because they've established that they didn't have an emotional connection and that it was just physical. So it just feels icky to me. It feels like, watching this white woman sexualize this black man just feels icky to me. I don't know that that's the intent. I'm not accusing the show of something nefarious, but it just plays that way on screen to me. Danny heads over to Bill's office to see Naomi because, remember, she wants to talk about plans for Naomi's birthday. She runs into Haley. She accuses Haley of ignoring Bill in his time of need. She brings up Randy Sammy. They have their little snark. Haley says, Danny gave Bill her youth, all the usual stuff. It was what it was. No big cliffhanger today. for no big Friday cliffhanger. The episode was it was fine. It wasn't a bad episode. There's just some questionable, the Heather Andre stuff. Heather, for me, just falls flat. I know there are some people who think that Heather is a great addition to the show. I'm be happy. I don't like it. I don't like that she's the impaler. I don't like that she's Andre's big secret. I don't like the way she moves and sexualizes Andre. I don't like that seems to be the central part. She's the central character on the show at this point. I mean, we spent a year and change complaining about them centering Ashley. And they said, oh, okay, we'll pull back on Ashley because, in fairness, they have pulled back on Ashley. But we're going to give you another white woman that we're going to center instead of writing for some of the other amazing black women that we've got on this show. Instead of telling a fully fleshed out story for Nicole, or telling a fully fleshed out story for Leslie, or giving Kat and Eva, not in the same story, but giving them, having them drive a story, having them drive their own individual stories. Because Eva's over her scar issue, it seems. So, yeah, I don't know. The Heather thing bothers me. I want the women to be more forceful when standing up to these men. They tend to, even though they've done better with Kat in standing up to Tomas when he's asking her those bullshit questions about trying to talk to Naomi, but they tend to have her diminish in front of him when he's lecturing her about money and, all that stuff. Naomi, while stands up to Tomas, she's not standing up fiercely enough. They're not writing her strongly enough, in my opinion. And, I just feel like there's this writing on the wall when it comes to how they're writing some characters who are new versus how they're writing the characters that we spent a year and a half invested in, and in some cases falling in love with, and it ain't right. That's all I'm going to say. I will be back later with the recap video. With the preview video for next week. And I think there's some new ratings information out. So I'll look through that and see what they're talking about there and come back to you with that as well. You guys, if I don't see you or chit chat with you, have a great weekend.